finally went nuclear on my entitled slob, BIL, and his lazy wife. After they crashed at my home uninvited, left our place a wreck, ignored my wishes, and tried turning my own wife against me, went all out on my entitled slob at last bill. Along with his lazy spouse, uninvitedly camped at my house and left RA crash, disregarded my requests, and attempted to turn my spouse against me. Been roughly a year married to Rita. And for the most part, it has been fantastic. She is 30F, and I am 31M. And we have been 3 years of dating before we were married. We came together as a result of a few mutual friends who believed it would. Would it be wise to put us in a blind? We joke about dating since we are so dissimilar. And in the end, everything worked out amazing because, we got married. But Rita hasn't David. The older brother is 35 years old. Erica, his spouse, is roughly my age. The wife and her brother are close because as they grew older, they much had only each other's mothers. Died not long after Rita's birth, and it was a terrible event for the household since she died in a road collision. Thus, no one anticipated it. Rita had only been born for 7 months. While her mom had gone to fetch the groceries, because her dad was working, only the kids and the babysitter were present. Who was present in her house at the time? And her father essentially becomes in permanent melancholy. Following thereafter, my mother passed away. My wife was clearly David was too little to recall, yet recalls how their father behaved following their mother's death and how he intended to use all of his days spent confined to his room. He had begun either sleeping or working, subsequently working from home, and even if everything was given to them. In essence, they had no parents. Even with their father's continued existence, there was no affection or love present, revealed to them, and it was pretty depressing. Anyway, they became aware of how pretty first, and they would need to be present for one another, given that their mother was gone and their father was hardly still alive. Living without her, thus they were forced to watch out for and enjoy each other's company, others' backs. And I believe it's lovely that they have such a wonderful, they have a close friendship. But at the simultaneously, it might become quite frustrating for me, as I don't directly originate from in a family. This is typical for background. I'm not related to any siblings. When I was 12, my parents divorced. I wouldn't say that it's years old, I just realized whether it had any effect on me. I now only have 2 rooms, nothing more. The divorce of my parents was not unexpected, given that, even when they were together, they would continue to battle. Frequently, and hardly ever communicate with, I genuinely don't even know each other way they coexisted with one another. However, after they received it, after 12 years, being divorced made their lives considerably more manageable, with and far more enjoyable to speak with. But in reality, I thought they should be after getting divorced. They kept being my co-parents and kept in contact, conversing about the various types of families that I'm not the type of guy that goes on dates every weekend or converse with my folks every day on the phone with them. I'm really busy with my life's job. And fortunately, we can communicate for even a day or 2 each month. I doubt my parents find it bothersome as well, because they their own lives and accept us as we are simply getting together occasionally as compared to every other day. However, it's not similarly. My spouse and I made an effort to acknowledge it sooner, realizing that she has had an entirely different upbringing and she and her brother are close for life. Yet it never stopped getting more challenging for me to handle over time. Back when we were courting, she was going to give him a call nearly daily, and I believed it to be the phone conversations would typically last for an hour without experiencing any problems with it, since in a sense, she belongs to my family, and that is her life, her decision, provided that it wasn't having a detrimental effect on me, that I did not having an issue with it, so I was aware of that. At night, she would be occupied, and I would not give her a call at that hour, but then she would chat with me after we moved in together, spending over 3 hours every day with her brother day, and on the weekends, he would visit us, which got a little annoying. little bit. Because of a few of the explanations, Rita and I both had full-time occupations and would be employed all through the day. So after returning home from work, I anticipated to have some free time at the moment with my girlfriend, but I would have to hold off until she finished conversing with her brother. And when the she had finished, I was exhausted, and I would nod off as soon as my head would strike the cushion that served as the weekdays. However, I had an idea for the weekends that we might be able to allocate spending time together, but on those, her brother would arrive at our door every day, and the entire weekend would be spent with us. When we were together, it seemed like we were failing to spend any time together, and me felt bad about it. In fact, I didn't even understand how to discuss it with her, without I stayed, because it sounded petty and insecure. Kept quiet about it for a few months. Then, we got into our first major altercation. Regarding a subject I'm not even there for, I decided to bring, luckily, that altercation with her everything settled, and we even discussed the too much time she was putting in with her sibling. And she informed me of that. She would make an effort to reduce it and provide more time with me instead. As it appears that whatever was causing me discomfort and entering the manner of our connection, and she didn't, I would like her to clarify to me that her brother was located a few hours distant on his own, which was unfamiliar to him, but he lived alone. Ever after their father went away a few years earlier, that he was experiencing extreme loneliness because his girlfriend was employed at another state with no intention of returning for the holidays. Therefore, he was unable to observe her frequently, so they were spending a great deal of time together. She hadn't told him, so he didn't feel alone. I asked him about it as he wasn't at ease discussing it, but after I received that justification, it began to make. It is a bit more coherent to me, as well recognized my point of view and assured me she would attempt to spend some time together, and we'd work on our relationship. After which, her brother began visiting fewer times, and they make cuts based on their call times. This had occurred a year after our relationship, but once we got the conversation and cleared the air, after everything calmed down, I proposed to her around a year later. But things began to get uncomfortable between David and I. Shortly after she began decreasing the amount of time, he would still see us from time to time, but on those visits, things would get uncomfortable. Could you not hold that against him since? It was me who had inquired, his sister, to see him less frequently, and that upset him because it meant that now he having to spend more time alone. So any time he would take digs, and we would be together. At me and make it seem like I was as well jealous and insecure to allow Rita inside. Of course, he would stay in touch with her family, mask everything as humor, but I was aware of that. He was pretty furious over what had occurred. I found it strange that he was reacting so strongly to this, because in reality, it wasn't about him. Even though Rita had been interacting with that kind of time, someone else, I would have felt the same way, marginalized. I don't believe it was improper for me to desire to be with my girlfriend, and I didn't do anything wrong. His partner was employed, out of Saint. While he was unable to be with her, his sister was not meant to take the place of that. In God's, then, I sensed a shift in the situation between us, and he only noticed me now. It is more like a kind of rivalry because that's how he even began acting. A month before my proposal, he planned a party and asked each of us to attend, which proved to be his wedding. Erica had left her work and returned. They decided to surprise us at home. Here, surprise is crucial. Therefore, I had had no notion they were getting married. They had opted out of the engagement and just getting married, which made sense since they had a very lengthy history together. Before that, I was pleased for them, and we didn't talk much there. Marriage, despite its tiny size, intimate, with just a few people invited by him, a few of his pals, colleagues, and family members, giving him enough opportunity to engage with me, but he decided not to. I didn't find it offensive, because it was his wedding, and he had the option of everything he desired, and it wasn't like pals. Anyhow, therefore, I didn't file a problem from it. But a month later, after I became engaged, I threw in celebration of engagement. A few days later, things he made all night during the celebration. Comments about how serious we were becoming regarding the contest, now that I've even become engaged merely because of his "I didn't want to get married" and fall. Even with his humor, there was quite repulsive, as this was intended to be a joyous moment for Rita and me. He was focusing all his time on himself. I doubt that anyone found it amusing, and everyone who was chuckling was engaging in it. For him to stop discussing it, Rita was not at all fond of it, and we discussed it later, but took no action, anything regarding it, as it didn't appear worthy of making a major deal out of problem, and we chose to concentrate on organizing instead of the ceremony. We were married for after 7 months. That's when he declared that he would be traveling with Erica to become parents, he declared. Around a week following our weddings, and Rita was thrilled. But my only concern was regarding the potential modifications to the dynamics after that, between us. As I am pretty sure he would take advantage of this chance to begin firing potshots. I realize that it sounds like I'm exaggerating it too much, but believe me, David behaved completely differently around me. Less than impolite, and needlessly, I was very passive-aggressive and correct, since as soon as they received pregnant, he began to joke about how I would declare that we were going to. The next thing they knew, she was pregnant. Since I could not possibly live with that, I was lagging behind, and that I had to prevail in every tournament I entered. He began by saying everything in a light-hearted manner, so I had to laugh. Too, each time he visited him, he said utter these foolish remarks, but on the I would be angry inside. Off anyhow, following the birth of their twin babies, they became instead occupied with their children, and did not come to see us as much as they would, and that was okay with us. Either since Rita recognized that we were parents, and I didn't even want David was around initially, so I was excellent. Everything was operating as usual. However, roughly 2 weeks ago, I returned home from work, and suddenly, I became aware of that David and Erica were now living at the house. I found it somewhat disorienting, since I couldn't recall having any "could you talk about this with Rita and me?" had been taken entirely by surprise. When I returned home, David was having fun with him in the living room. Rita, Erica, and the twins are cooking in the kitchen together. I also observed that numerous bags remained unpacked in the living area, and I requested that Rita talk to me privately so that I could once realized what this was all about. I asked her while we were alone in our bedroom what was happening, and she informed me of that. She extended an invitation to move in with us for around a month, as it appears that Erica had to resign from her position after learning that she's pregnant, although she wasn't on maternity leave, similar to what she had notifying everyone of her pregnancy. She'd barely started her new job at business for a few months, and they don't provide paid time off to new mothers who aren't even employed. She'd been told it had been there for a year. She might take maternity leave of absence. She would have to take a paid leave of absence. Arrive for work after deciding to resign because she couldn't handle the tension, even consider it. David was making enough money, so it didn't seem to provide a challenge to any of them at all, the period. But she now dedicated the full day at home, something she was not accustomed to contributing to the household costs, because she has been employed ever since she turned 18, which is why she was finding it difficult to skip work, loved spending time with her kids at home. Thus, she had been misbehaving, and David believed that perhaps this was a postpartum sadness or some issue, so he has been quite worried about it and had communicated to her physician and had arrived at the finding that it would be more advantageous for her to have the opportunity to spend time with her other individuals as well, rather than just abandon all day with the children. So they determined that we would cohabitate till she was prepared to leave under one roof returning to work, or until she was well. I was not sure how I felt about it. Choice, given that I hadn't even been a part of the conversation, and Rita had decided without considering spoken with me initially, even though both of we shared a home, and this was an item that ought to have been a collaborative conversation, as opposed to simply her making a decision, and then letting me know following her prior approval of it, even when she knew full well that the formula involving David and me. So we got into a minor altercation that day. After I informed her that I wasn't at ease with the notion of cohabiting with, she has been with them for over a week. Already decided that each of us would be residing together for a minimum of 1 month. Although, not that I had been a part of that conversation, so I couldn't figure out why she had assumed I would be all right with it, particularly considering the conditions that David and I were in, vehemently opposed to it. And she believed that I was being self-centered and that I ought to consider her family and their well-being as opposed to being trivial. I finally had to give in because she had begun to manipulate me emotionally and declared that she was opposed to having a terrible conscience if Erica were to truly had experienced postpartum depression. So she was prepared to assist them. It would be over in a month. At least she informed me that I was far too exhausted to argue with her no longer. Therefore, I decided to let it go, because that ultimately, I was aware that she truly cared for her family. Therefore, this was simply something I had to acknowledge, even if I didn't like her brother's family. More specifically, they were all considerate of noisy and bothersome cohabitants, notably David, who was always making fun of others at me. And I wouldn't say I liked having to get out of bed. Awake in the middle of the night, due to, though one of their twins was in tears, it did not even to disturb Rita, as she wasn't a light sleeper such as me. And in fact, in actuality, nobody else was either. Felt unfair, since I was experiencing to give up so much for children that I have nothing. They're not even mine. Against the kids, but I wasn't fond of the adults involved in this circumstances, did not appear to concern anyone other than oneself. And the fact that David and his wife were the worst were both enormous idiots, which wasn't something I could agree with, since I tend to be a little neat freak. And I wouldn't say I like it when individuals don't even wish to go as far as possible in their leave their plates here, and they would never clean the house, cleaning themselves off, and they were unable to even bother to complete their fair part of household tasks. So everything, I wouldn't say I liked having to live in that enormous mess. I even attempted to inform them gently that they needed to tidy up following themselves, and everyone merely laughed at them of me since they believed that I was being absurd and would request that I shed some illumination, which was even more frustrating than what they were undertaking. I eventually became angry with them a few times. A few days ago, and Rita has been avoiding conversation with me since she believes I was pretty impolite and that I should not acted in such a manner toward her. David and Erica's relatives are aware of they are obviously on her, fighting, side, but they're not ignoring me either. Undoubtedly, they're all giving me the chilly shoulder, and I have no idea what 3 days ago. I made a mistake, and I returned. When I got home from work, everything was I couldn't even enter the mess without treading on an object. Since there were clothing and toys are everywhere, there were sporadic food stains on the floor, the couch's walls, and Erica was taking a nap with her kids on the couch despite having the guest room to themselves. David and the others were seated on the watching with a glass of wine on the couch. The football match taking place that day, and he didn't even appear offended by the fact that the entire space had a tremendous sadly. He generally returns home before me. As a result of his recent reduction in his hours since the birth of the children, and I'm not sure what took place that day, but I suddenly lost it and began to yell. I informed everyone that I woke Erica up. David and she said I would observe the children, but they had to tidy the house right away, as this was my home, and the deed bore my name, so they could carry out their desires. When they were residing in where they own house, this, their home. Guests, and they had to follow my instructions. I had attempted to advise them to retain the house is frequently cleaned, and I had before addressed it with great grace. However, it appears that it did not have the wanted result. Therefore, I started to demand that they follow my instructions, and they needed to tidy the house. Debate with me, since I was so enraged off, and I was screaming uncontrollably as the twins began to wail. I took them because of all the ranting. I instructed them to go into the guest room, start working as I observed the children. I was very furious, and I had just returned 2 hours later when the residence was immaculate, but I didn't believe it. Not without acknowledging David and Erica, since I had been requesting that this for a very long time, and they had only since I had begun to yell at them. So once I had confirmed that the residence was, I cleaned up and headed to my room. There, up until Rita returned home, she'd worked past my regular hours that day, and I had being aware of it, she returned home. Relatively late, about 10 o'clock at night. As soon as she returned home, she became our room and began clashing with me about what had transpired previously. She said I told David what I had said. Erica and my behavior with her in the day was utterly intolerable, and she desired an apology from me to them due to, she believed that I had treated them rudely. About himself, she deliberately thought and his spouse that I had never liked David, who was simply such garbage, and all I was attempting to do which I didn't was bring him down out any of that and instill guilt. I genuinely only desired a clean house. I even attempted to clarify that to her. However, she wasn't prepared to hear me out and instructed me to offer an apology. Due to how I conducted myself, that day was not all right, and she didn't think it was the fact that I believed I could talk similar to her family. She even visited, to the extent that I would say no like it if she behaved in a way around me. Family, but I don't believe that's entirely distinct, since first of all, I would never offer my parents a place to reside without confirming her well-being with it first. And perhaps more crucially, if my parents were still here, I would, ensuring that they wouldn't sabotage the residence, such as her brother and his relatives had been unpleasant to them. It wasn't very kind to them residing in my home and ignoring my thoughts on additionally hygienic practices and cleanliness insulting to me as of late. It's been a few days and my spouse is not conversing with me when everyone else is my wife and I are ignoring me. And we both sleep on our backs in the same room. To one another. That's how awful it is, correct? I feel terrible about this right now. And it seems like they are aiming for purposely. It will sound a little youthful, but that's not really how it feels like, though. I am on one side, and everyone else is being forced aside as a result of all they want is for me to feel like a villain for desiring such a simple thing. No one is on my watch as I clean the house. Viewpoint on this, and the sole those who handle me as though they children typically do, which is just so I wish I could make things right with my wife. However, I refuse to apologize since I believe that I did nothing improper. So Ida, for losing his cool with my brother-in-law and his wife, as they had shared a home with and had left my house in disarray. Update 1. I read over the feedback. Things I had received from you people on the original post, and the majority of respondents concurred because I have no justification for I apologize now. And I acknowledge that it has a week after our altercation, and I haven't heard from you yet. Therefore, this is most likely the most significant period without conversing with one another. And if this continue any longer than I believe, I could move out and submit a divorce petition since I see no other way out of the situation. She refuses to issue an apology to AP and admit that she made a mistake and that none of it is necessary for me to perform because I did not misbehave. So we are in an impasse and I'm at a loss for what to do about it. And it makes me sad. Since I genuinely want to make this her. Labor, but not at the expense of my honor. So I'm going to leave, or we'll talk this out. And this union terminates. It's going to be depressing if that occurs. However, I genuinely don't know what more to provide an update. All right. Yesterday I was discussing divorce, and I don't now. I believe that will be required. Thank you. Thank God for it, because when I returned home from my job today, I discovered that with the house empty, Rita finally spoke. She had returned home before I had, and she at last admitted to me that I apologize for the way she has been, manner in which she claimed to have evolved into so forgetful of her family to be protective that she and I were now family, even though couldn't believe her foolishness. She admitted to me that she regretted arguing with me the following day and had been attempting to keep her distance from David so she could have some time to reflect from my vantage point. And she had recognized how mistaken she had even been attempted to speak with Erica and David They should have apologized to me, but they began trying to make her oppose me and disparaged me, which was the final straw, was the moment David recommended she go. She had been attempting to persuade them into. I would like to apologize for the last few of morning. Days earlier, she had tried to speak with them once more and inquired to express regret to me. But that's when David mentioned the reality that I have not spoken to her since we last that altercation. He informed her that I was inconsiderate of her and her family, and she ought to advocate for herself. Quit me. So she made an effort to clarify to him that even though they were acting attractive, impolite by failing to make an effort to listen to me when I expressed my desire for my home to be cleaned. So he got to work, having a tantrum, and declaring that she was being unjust to them due to their inexperienced parents and were pressed for time, energy to continuously take care of the home. And when she made an effort to support me and claimed she was handling the majority of the domestic tasks and Erica was spared take any action, and David returned as well. Leaving work early, at the very least, they could the boss keep the house clean, so they ended up fighting. And she realized exactly how caustic and entitled they were, so she told them to leave, and they departed. But they said to her that they were upset that she had opted to be just like me. She had understood that they were not the appropriate individuals, and obviously did not want the best for her, since if they had, they would have known that she was satisfied with me and did not want to abandon me. I was thrilled that they were gone, and Rita and I were finally back, but we had a lot to work on and sort out. Therefore, we have agreed that we are going to see a marriage counselor this weekend and make an effort to once more, as usual. I genuinely adore her, would have detested being without her. Therefore, this is perfect because everyone errs. And I'm relieved that she understood that she had chosen poorly a few times by turning me off. But at least right now, she admitted it and expressed regret. So we can work on and fix everything. Update 3. Hello, this is simply following our initial therapy meeting, and it proceeded fairly well. We had numerous problems, and I believe that was quite clear from my post. But as of right now, we've chosen that. Every time there is a disagreement, we are planning to discuss it and ensure that we put an end to it right there, rather than just allowing it to intensify. Before blowing up, things were challenging to get things out of proportion, discuss topics in front of a stranger. However, we eventually adapted to it, and after we settled into the rhythm of it, it was genuinely somewhat comforting. And I feel like though I just had a massive revelation about my chest, I genuinely sense that she's feeling in the same manner, and I'm truly looking. Moving ahead to see where this takes us. We've had issues previously, but I'm looking eager to resolve them. She also believes she ought to receive counseling for herself as a result of the things that have. Events involving her brother have truly, after shaking her up, they stopped speaking because he stopped answering after the altercation. I find it unbelievable. People can be very unappreciative. Yet, I have David is that way. I suppose I never enjoyed him a lot, but I think I like him even less. Something I never even considered was feasible. But it's okay. I'm aware of that. We are capable of overcoming anything if she will go on, and we will be together. I promise to ensure it is based on this.